Will the recording be made available, Sally?
Yes, if I can work out how to make it available, yes. I'm sure somebody will help me with that. Yeah, I was going to say it is being recorded. If you don't want to be seen or identified, then you can change your name and disappear yourself, though it is nice to see people's faces if they don't mind. I'm not going to enter it into Cannes Festival or anything, but it will be widely available for all those who want to see one of my training sessions, which I'm sure will go viral in a matter of no time. So yeah, if you do care about that, when we're in breakout groups, if I manage to do that, then it doesn't record, I understand. So you can reveal yourself in your small group if you're happier with that. So I'm running through my notes of things I need to say to you. I've sent you a mock application form, and I've put already in the chat the link to that, and I've just put it there again for anyone who didn't get it. We're not going to like have it in front of us all the way through, so don't worry too much. You can always grab it at some other point. And I've also sent you another chart, which is, I hope, self-explanatory, which we're not going to refer to again. We might refer to it, but we're not going to sit with it in front of us. So don't worry about that. We are going to be using Mentimeter. If anybody's not used that before, then it's useful. You can have it on another tab on your computer, but a lot of people find it easier to have it separately on their phones. So you can have that in front of you. And what you do is you put www.mentee.com into your phone or gadget, and then you use a code. It asks you for a code, and I will give you that. I'm going to start with screen sharing, and that at the top gives you the information I mentioned to a few of you earlier on, which is either on a different tab on your computer or on a separate gadget. If you could enter www.mentee.com, and then when prompted, put in the code that is also at the top of here, 9644306. And it will initially take you to this presentation, but don't worry about that. You only need to look at it and worry about it when we're doing an exercise that is part of the presentation. If you've not used Mentee before, it's brilliant, and I thoroughly recommend it. Okay, this is what we're going to cover in today's session. I'm not going to go over it again because I've mostly gone over it. This is what we're going to be talking about. This is the content of the session. We're going to look at general approaches to funding, and we're going to focus on answering questions that come up in funding application forms. And in particular, we're going to look at describing impact. A, because that's what I do, that's my job, and B, because that, in my opinion, and I think it's widely shared, is the crucial bit of an application form that people so often get wrong, is describing impact. This slide has City Bridge Trust there because they're the people who fund my post. And I would say that just as a matter of interest, so by the end of this is the outcomes for this training, but it's always good to learn about outcomes. You will have a good understanding of how to approach funding applications. You will have a look at the key questions, and you'll hopefully be confident about those. And you'll be focusing on your project that I asked you to come with in your head, which can be real or imaginary, but you'll hopefully have an idea about how that fits and how you would describe that. So let's start, and this is the first time when you get to use the Mentee thing. If you have put it into your phone, I'm just trying to do the same now, you should see things saying, how are you feeling? And it gives you an option to fill in some questions. Has everybody got that? And hopefully you can see on the screen share some of the words and phrases that people are coming up with. Some people are struggling, somebody's exasperated. I hope it's not with me, but it might be with this whole process. Lots of people are interested, so I think that's good. Somebody's relaxed. That is excellent. I am not relaxed, I should tell you. I'm not relaxed because I'm nervous that it would all go wrong. But hopefully it won't be too bad. There's still one or two of those coming in. And I think it gives the biggest ones are the ones that people have put more often. That's how word clouds usually work. So we've got a big interested, but we also got a big happy and quite a big excited, which is quite nice, isn't it? Glad people are excited and only a little exasperated, though even though you're the only one who's exasperated, I do feel for you. Okay, thank you so much. That was just to get us going. We will move on. Okay. This is how you approach a funding application or a funding strategy and an approach to funding your organisation and the work you do in general. A funding strategy is your organisation's approach to the whole issue of funding. And if you set it down, you'll have an approach to funding. But if you set it down in words, even better in a nice typed report with a picture on the front, then you've got a strategy. CVS Brent can provide you with a template if you haven't already got a strategy. But what most people tend to do is to have one, but it's in their head and they don't put it down in words. And if you don't put it down in words, you can't easily share it and you can't easily agree it and make it integral to your approach with everybody that's part of your organization. So I would suggest that if you haven't already got one, you get one and you use it not as an annoying piece of paperwork or red tape, though you may find at times you do need it to prove that you've got one, but you use it as an essential tool for going forward. Do get help if you've got any problems with that at all. Next on this list is a funding pack. And you hear people talk about this less frequently than a strategy. A funding pack, and let me know if you want a checklist of a funding pack, because I can easily let you have one of those. Email me afterwards. A funding pack is a list of all the bits of information that you might well need when you do a funding application. When you sit in front of a funding application, if it's an online one or even a paper one or whatever, you will find yourself, I do, frequently going, oh, right, it's asking me that. Oh, heck, where can I find that information? So a funding pack means you've got it. It's already there. You've already foreseen almost everything that they might want. Even down to the big lottery sometimes asks for the birth dates of trustees, for example. And how many people know all their trustees' dates of birth off by heart? Very few. So you have to go running after those. But a funding pack would mean it's there. But not only little twiddly things like that, but bigger, juicier things, obviously like outcomes and outcomes measurement, which is our focus, but also just how would you describe the organisation? What is its background? When did it start? When did it register as a charity, etc.? You've got it all to hand. Eligibility. If you are not eligible for a fund, if you're not obviously eligible, do not bother applying for it. There's no point. It's a waste of time and it's a waste of the funder's time. Very few funders will let you off and say, oh, even though you're not a good fit, we'll let your application come in, because they've got loads of applications that are a good fit. So why would they do that? Always, always, always read the guidance that goes with an application. Don't think, oh, I know this, or it's obvious. Read the guidance. It will not only give you specifics as to how they want you to answer this question, but it will give you a feel for them, a feel for what kind of things are they into, what are they after. And even if you theoretically fit the eligibility, it could be that by the time you get to the end of the guidance, you think they're not really after what I'm doing, so don't bother applying. There are times, obviously, when you're not an absolute exact fit, but you do think, actually, that is something we could do and we could do well and would be a worthwhile development. So I'm not saying, and it's an absolute rule to never apply if you're not an exact fit, but a lot of the time it really isn't worthwhile. The final point here about your general approach is about addressing the question. It's so obvious, but so many people get it wrong. And if you've ever been on the other side, if you've ever been receiving application forms and reading through them, not just funding application, if you've ever been on the side of receiving job applications, you'll know that the most infuriating thing is when people do not answer the question. There are a few on funding applications, there are a few specific things that people frequently get wrong. One is describing the need when what it's asking for is evidence of need. So it'll say, what is the evidence of the need that your project will address? And people go, oh, well, they're very poor people, they've had a hard time, they really need some help. Or words to that effect. That doesn't evidence that need. It just tells them what the need is. But it's amazing how many times people don't evidence it. Evidence means providing proof, or not quite proof, but providing stuff that might add up to proof that this is a problem. Another common mistake is talking about outputs instead of outcomes. So we'll be covering this a lot. Outcomes are the result, the change that happens. Outputs are the things you do. So if they say, what are the outcomes, what will be the outcomes of your project? And you say, oh, well, there will be a youth club on a Wednesday night. That's not an outcome, that's an output. So it's interesting to know about your outputs, but it's not an outcome. And the other common mistake is being very vague in describing what the project is. So people will say, will wax lyrical about the project. It's going to be great. It'll achieve this. Its fundamental principles are, we believe in this. Yeah, but what are you actually going to do? What is the project? So that's another common mistake. And that's our preparation done. We've got our funding pack, we've got a strategy, we're following it. I should have said, when your funding strategy should always follow your development plan. So you're planning to develop in these areas, or which might just be to sustain what you already do. It doesn't have to be building on it. And then you think about how you are going to fund that development. So that's the order. Then you come to the application form. I'm going through basically 6 questions, though they've all got lots of little bits to them, which will probably be in an application form asked as separate questions. But this is our first. Obviously, you need to give your name, address, your contact details. I'm not going to patronize you by going through those with you. In fact, the only one I'm really going to pick up on here is the charity or company numbers. These days, you don't always, if you're applying where you don't have to be a registered charity, it may well be you're just a community organisation and you haven't got any kind of registration number. But just to be aware that what they may want is a charity number. If you are one of the modern charities, a CIO, then you only have a charity number. If you're one of the old style charities, then you will have both a charity and a company number. If you're a CIC or other kind of company, social enterprise often called, then you will only have a company number. So again, just to make that clear, because people often get confused and get it wrong. But if you've got your funding pack, it'll all be there at the ready. I want to talk about the difference between a organisation and your project. And I'm going to ask you to go into breakout groups to briefly explore this. So I believe I have to stop sharing to do that. And I'm going to put you into breakout groups, and I'd like you just to spend a couple of minutes talking about what you understand the difference to be between your organisation and your project that you're asking for funding for. If your answer is there's no difference, then that is a perfectly legitimate answer. People coming back, welcome. I'm just replying to an email from somebody else saying they can't get in.
Sally?
Yes?
It'd be really useful to let us know how long we've got in the breakout rooms.
Good idea. Thank you for your feedback. I'll try and do that. How long would you like?
Well, it just as long as we know how long we've got, then we can divide it by the number of participants in the breakout room.
Ah, yeah. Good one. Good feedback. Thank you. Okay. Going to screen share again. Okay. I'm not going to ask you for feedback from that because it all will be revealed, but I thought it would be useful for you to think about what your understanding is before I tell you the answers. So the reason that that's important is because a lot of it's a thing a lot of people get wrong in an application. The second question that I'm dealing with asks you about your organization, and the third question asks you about your project. So just important to know that your organization is how to describe it, whatever your organization is called. So say it's called Make People Happy, then your organization probably has several different things it does that are about making people happy. Yeah. So it goes and smiles at people on the street, and it sends nice messages to people to make them feel happy. But your project could be something like you want to start having groups where you have laughter therapy. Have you heard of that? You want to add that onto it very much fits within your Make People Happy organization, but it's something you haven't done before, or it's something you've had a little go at and you want to carry on doing it, so you want it funded. So your organization is Make People Happy, and you describe what you do and what you've done and everything. Your project is starting laughter therapy groups to make people happy. So that's the difference. Your organization has a specific purpose, and it has activities that it carries out. And you sometimes be asked separately about those, but more often it will just say, describe your organization and what it does and why it does it. Sometimes you can look at your charitable objects if you are a registered charity for clues to that. Though if you're a very old, long-standing organization, don't worry too much about them. They're likely to be in archaic language and not really say how it is these days. So talk more about your purpose. These are all useful things to have ready, so you can just pick them out of your funding pack as previously described. You may be asked in this part to include a record of your organisation, what achievements you've had, what you've done before. And this is trying to demonstrate that you've not just started, though if you have, it doesn't mean you can't apply, but it may be an eligibility criteria that you're not brand new. But if you're allowed to be brand new, that's fine. But they may well want you to describe what you've done before in terms of managing other budgets, other grants, and what you've done before in terms of managing projects. Managing grants, that's why it is a good idea, but it's not an absolute rule, but it is a good idea to early on in an organization's existence to apply for smaller grants, so that then when you apply for a bigger grant, you can say, oh, well, we did have this £10,000 from Awards for All, and this is what we did with it. This is how we managed it. We did very well. We got our returns back in time, and we got good results from it. And now we want to expand, and that's why we're asking for 150,000 or whatever. And make that miniature. If you're a tiny organization, it may have been you've had a grant for £200 and you're now asking for 1,000. That's fine. So that's your organization. Oh, I should have said I've put cakes throughout the presentation for no good reason at all. So I hope you enjoy them. This was my wedding anniversary cake back in February. Your project. So this is the thing that you want to do with the money that you're asking for. Sometimes you'll be asking more than one funder for the money, and that's fine, but this is the project that this funder wants to know about. You'll have space to tell them that you're asking other people at some point. And this is where you describe that project. So you've already described your organization. Don't go on about that again. Describe the project. Now, very, very small or brand new organizations, they may be looking for money, and what they do as an organization is basically what they're going to do as a project because they're new. So say you set up to have exercise in the park sessions. That's what you've formed your organization for, exercise in the park. You've had a little go using volunteers, and now you want some funding to get a paid proper exercise type person. And so you're applying for funding. So occasionally your organization is the same as your project, but I think even then you need to draw a distinction and say, this is what we've set up as, this is what we've done so far, this is our background, our reasons for existing, and this is what we now want to do, and this is what we hope you will fund us for doing. Use the guidance and the word count course, which most applications have, to help you determine the level of detail you go into. So I've got an example here. You might say something like, our project is to develop street football sessions for young people in Stonebridge. If it allows, you could add 5 youth workers will use detached youth work to engage with young people in or around the park every Friday and Saturday evening, 6 till 9. We will organise football skills sessions open to any young people, and from that develop a local league with organised football matches on Saturdays. Yeah, if it gives you the space, you can pad it out. If it just lets you write one line, think of a quickie way of saying it. You might then be asked to break down the activity into some kind of a timetable. So this is what we'll do in the first week or month, and this is what we'll then do, and this is what we'll then do, etc. If they do that, and I've not included that on the mock application form that I've sent you all, because it's usually included for bigger amounts. And it's very, very specific to your project. But don't forget to include things like recruitment, promotions, a launch if you're going to have one, and then obviously your regular sessions, and then don't forget your evaluation at the end. So you need to see the thing as a whole and in kind of chronological order, although obviously there'll be a lot of crossing over. So we're not going to do that here, but if you want any help with that in the future, do get in touch. Unless the guidance or the question is specifically asking you to say why you are doing this, then this is not the place to wax lyrical about your purpose. This is not the place to say, oh, well, it's going to be wonderful because we're helping these poor people and that everything will change for them. There might be a line or two about that. There's no harm in that. But this is where they want to know what your project is, not why it is.
Yeah. All right, take care. Bye.
So for an example might be if you've got a project addressing antisocial behaviour, you want to describe, like I've just given you in the example, a youth club that you're setting up or something like that, this football league on the streets. So you might start by saying, we will address the problem of antisocial behaviour by, and then you go on to say what your project is. Your beneficiaries, again, often a separate question, but I've included it all under your project here. This is where you say who you're going to help. And it might also ask you to describe the need. So you're saying, we're going to help ginger-haired people because there's a lot of discrimination. There is. I know I'm joking, but there is, and it's serious. There's discrimination against ginger-haired people. There has been historically, and they find that they get shouted at and teased and mocked. So you're talking about the need there. You're also talking about the people that you're going to help. And it says here include how many. So you might be saying there's a 200 ginger-haired people in Brent, and we're going to be helping all of them because they all get this problem of being bullied and teased about the colour of their hair. Yeah. So that's your beneficiaries. Just making sure I haven't missed anything out. Oh, I did another example here of how you might describe a more serious one than ginger-haired people. No offense to ginger-haired people. Since COVID-19, young people have struggled with being away from friends. Emotional health has increased, ill health has increased, and many young people have got into trouble for breaking the rules. So they are resented and seen as a nuisance in the area. Some have been involved in antisocial and criminal activities, such as underage drinking and causing a nuisance to nearby residents. Currently, there are no structured activities in the park and the football pitches have become run down and littered. The young people need support to engage in organised football activities to build resilience, cooperation, physical and mental health and personal confidence. So I sneaked in some outcomes there at the end, but mostly I was talking about who it is we're going to be helping and what the need is there. Evidence of need, I'm going to come back to in a second. And the last bit you might get asked here is how you're going to make sure, this is a popular awards for all question, how are you going to make sure that everyone knows equally about the project? So this is about your marketing and promotions campaign. How are you going to get the message out there so that not just your friends and their kids know about it, so that not just the better off people know about it, so that the people who are really struggling have the same chance to access your service as anyone else. So that's all on my mock application form. That's all under your project. You may find it asked as different questions. I would like you now to go to mentee.com again. It should still be there if you haven't moved from last time. And using speech bubbles, which I hope works because I've not previously tried this out. Remembering that evidence of need is not the same as the need itself, have a go at thinking of examples of where you might find evidence of need. What evidence of need could you use for your project specifically if you want, or possibly for any project? What types of evidence of need do you already know about? So you should have your mentee meter. If you've lost it, put in mentee.com at the top and then type in the code again, and you should be able to say how you are feeling. I'll find it on mine, so I don't know if you're finding it on yours. Has anyone found it there? Oh yes, somebody's put something, so that's good. these ideas that people have got are fantastic. Have a read of everyone's ideas. Brilliant. So that it really divides, as you've perfectly well illustrated, it really divides into three. There are three main areas, let's say, of where we get evidence of need. I'll just run through them quickly because it looks like you already all know. One is what we vaguely call statistics, but it also include policy or plans or priorities. It can also include reports that stress, for instance, that there's a big need in this particular community, etc. Most people make use of the government's deprivation indicators, and they are really useful, although sometimes you've got to do a little bit of work to tease out the relevance to what you're doing. So I strongly recommend stealing from somebody who's already done it. So in Brent, for instance, the Brent Borough Plan that goes to 2023 has already got some lovely statistics, all taken from the government's indicators of deprivation. But you can now steal, you can even steal their nice charts. I suppose you'd probably have to reference them. But you can certainly take some information from what somebody else has already done. This is where you're showing things like crime has risen in the area, more people are using food banks. You're not quite proving that there's a problem, but you are evidencing it. You can also include things like newspaper articles, police reports, because if there's known to be a problem in the area, then that will be widely reported on, and you can say that. You can say, we've noticed that there's a problem in the area. This is how we've noticed it. So that's all your stats. Next one, consultation, which loads of you put on in the exercise. This basically means that you've asked people. This is likely to be about the need for your project, but it may also be you've asked people what features they want within that project. That people could have been approached, they have actually approached you because you're a service provider and said to you, well, actually what we need is this. So there's lots of different ways in which you may have talked to people, which is all that consultation means. However, when you're applying for funding, it comes across much better to a funder if there looks like there's some structure and coordination around that consultation process. So I would say you're almost certainly consulting with people. You're asking people, was that nice? Did it go well? Did you like it? Have you got something out of it? And what would you like to see? You're all consulting with people all of the time. But if you can formalize that, even if it is carried out in a very informal way, if you can put some parameters around it, write it up as a report, present it in some way, then you can refer to it. You don't have to send it. You can refer to it in your funding application with some authority. Likewise, evaluation. This is where evaluation of one service gives you evidence that that service is needed, or it gives you evidence that another service is needed, or needs to be varied, or needs to be built on. For example, here's my example. You run a football club in the park, attended by boys, but several girls have approached asking if there's anything for them. Or possibly girls in your mixed indoor session said in a survey that they want girl-specific sports activities. It could also be that in your evaluation, you start to spot that there are some gaps. So part of your evaluation is looking at your attendance, and you find out that there aren't any girls that have been coming, or the number of girls coming are very low. Why not? Do we need, maybe just you need to promote it in a particular way. But it may also be that you need to fill that gap, and that's your evaluation giving you evidence that you need to build a new project or extend a project, and therefore you need to apply for funding for it. Okay, we're doing good time. I think I apologized in my original email for the fast pace. I just want to get through everything. This is my bit. This is my job. Oh, it's fun. Monitoring and evaluation. I hope you all agree it's the best thing available. Funders vary both in how much information they want and in what terms they choose to ask for what they want. The big funders like the National Lottery, Children in Need, Lloyds Bank Foundation as it is now, they tend to lead the field really in this. Smaller grant givers are less demanding. They don't give as much money, but they're less demanding of how you describe your monitoring and evaluation arrangements. Statutory grant makers, such as Brent Borough Council or any other local authorities, are, in my experience, not as good at understanding the whole monitoring, evaluation and outcomes measurement field. They are more likely to ask you a lot of monitoring information. How many people came? How many unique individuals? I don't know if you've heard that expression, which is the difference between footfall. You know, we get 200 people coming to our sessions, but if they're the same 200 people every time, then you've got 200 unique individuals. You may get 200 people who come some of the time, but you get there's an average of 200 people at your sessions, but in actual fact, there's 400 unique individuals coming. Local authorities are obsessed with numbers of people and numbers of sessions. How many times have you done that activity so that people could come along to? They're getting better, but what, and they would be better to focus on outcomes, which, as I say, the big funders have really started to, well, a long time ago, they learnt about it. I did my first outcomes training with Children in Need about 20 years ago. Yeah. I hope they've existed that long, or you'll all think I'm telling fibs, but it was ages ago. Okay. Impact, outcomes and indicators. I'm going to come back to that. That's first on this list. But number 2, how your project will result in the changes described. I just wanted to mention this because it's sometimes asked as a question, and a few people manage to hit the right notes on answering this. And that's because it is quite a hard question. It's asking how what you do will result in those changes. So it's not saying what are the changes it will result in, and it's not saying what are you doing. It's saying what are you doing that will result in that change. If any of you have done theory of change training or just learnt about it in any way, that's what theory of change is really useful for. It takes the problem, the challenge that you're facing, and it takes the outcome that you want to achieve, and it says, how are we getting from there to there? So I recommend theory of change training if you haven't done it. NCVO do some good courses on it. Okay, next, number 3 here, involvement of beneficiaries. Oh, this is important, and so few people get it super duper right.
It looks bad if I just leave, innit?
Somebody's got their
Just keep it up there. They don't know I'm not there.
We do, because we can hear you. The National Lottery says, how will you involve beneficiaries in the design, delivery and evaluation of your project? Design, that should have happened before. Remember the talk about consultation. That's where you're talking to people about what they want. However, you can say that you'll involve them going forward as the project evolves and develops, that you will be involving the beneficiaries in how that develops, letting them have a say in that. Delivery is is where beneficiaries are actually part of the operations of the project. And evaluation is analysing what happened, what went well, etc., which we will talk some more about. And so you can look at how you will involve people in evaluation and consultation on design. You might have user forums, representation on panels. You might have beneficiaries who are also volunteers. And obviously you'll have them completing surveys, etc., and sharing in the running of things. It's the hardest thing to do unless you're a very grassroots organisation which has developed from beneficiaries, which, you know, aren't uncommon and they're great. If you're an organisation that's set up, especially if you've got paid professionals that run it, involving those beneficiaries is a very challenging thing to do, partly in practical terms, it's just hard to do it, and partly in principle, because it's easier. I think it's easier to just get on and do what you think's best, and supply your services, whereas getting people to have a say in that can be quite hard. But often in an application, they want you to know how you're going to do that. And finally on this list, though I am coming back to number one, is how will you know the change has taken place? This is outcomes measurement. So you'll have told them what the change is going to be, and this is about how you will measure it. A lot of people repeat here the change that's going to take place, but it's asking you how you will know that. So we will be coming back to that. Okay. Right, another little mentee exercise. If you'll look at your mentee things, and you should have a list of possible definitions of an outcome. If you could tick them. Well, what we've got here, and I'm quite glad that some people have got it wrong. No one said the continuation of the activities, and no one said the project happening as planned. Though those are both things that need to be monitored. Some people have put the numbers of people who attend. Now, that's a monitoring piece of information, the numbers of people who attend. It's important, and it can be an indication that you are meeting your outcomes. So if your outcome is, for instance, people are happier, people are super duper happy, then the numbers of people who carry on attending the activity that makes them super duper happy can be an indicator that you are meeting your outcome. But it is not actually an outcome in itself. The outcome is, as most people have said, the change in beneficiaries, the change that takes place in people and communities as a result of the activities you do or the delivery of your project. That's an outcome. I made a little video, which I'm sure you've all seen, but because it's so good and so professionally done, I thought I'd show it here again. Apologies.
There's no volume, Sally, if there's supposed to be volume.
Oh, that's a pity because it's fun.
If you unshare it, and then at the bottom when you share, you'll get two little boxes on the share screen that says use PC sound or something like that.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But we'll manage without. It's only a minute long, so we're nearly done. The the sound, I'm laughing at the sound myself, laughing at my own jokes. The sound is quite funny, so well, I think it is. So if you didn't get the sound, then, and you haven't seen it before, then do have a look on CVS Brent's YouTube channel, where there's a few other things. Okay. Here you can see some definitions of important terms. I've stolen these from a bulletin. If you're not on my bulletin list, then again, get in touch and ask to be. And this was the most recent one where I did these quick definitions in haiku form. Not exactly haikus, but roughly. So impact is a word that is often used interchangeably with outcomes, or it's used in broad terms to mean what effect does your project have on people. And sometimes in a funding application, you will be asked to just describe the impact of your project. And if that's the only question they ask, that's where your outcome stuff has got to go. But impact in strict terms means this, as I've said, it means a much broader, longer lasting effect that you're not going to do on your own. You're not going to cut youth crime on your own, for instance, or reduce the levels of people in poverty. But your project is going to be part of that. It's going to contribute to that. And so that's your big, broad umbrella aim. But your outcomes of your project, your direct outcomes, are the real change that you might see. So you might see the people in poverty that your project is aimed at. You might see them getting 3 square meals a day, or you might see them feeling more able to access support, etc. So your outcomes are specific to your project, whereas your impact is much broader. An indicator, as it says here, is a much more specific and defined sign that things are changing. So people are happy would be an outcome. People smile when they enter the session. People hug their friends after COVID. They would be indicators. They're more observable. They're more measurable. But please, please never get all in a capoodle about what's an outcome and what's an indicator, because it doesn't really matter. Very few funders actually ask you to divide things into outcomes and indicators. But just for your learning, an outcome is the change that takes place. An indicator is a specific, defined and measurable way of knowing that you're on the way to meeting that outcome. Okay. This is taken from Brent Borough Council's plan. It looks like a complicated thing, but have a look at the plan yourself. I just put it on here, not meaning for you to sit and read through it all. So they've got 5 main priorities, and then they divide into what we could call indicators. So let's take an example: a cleaner, more considerate Brent. That's the bit in orange, and what it calls desired outcomes there, but we could call indicators, are an improvement in air quality and a reduction in illegally dumped rubbish. So they want a cleaner, more considerate Brent. That's their big outcome. And the ways in which they will know and be able to measure if they've got a cleaner, more considerate Brent are that the air quality will have improved. That's very measurable. And that there's a reduction in illegally dumped rubbish. So people aren't dumping rubbish, and that's not causing a problem as much as it used to. So you've got your very measurable indicators. One of the charts that I sent you before the session and that you can still access sets out all the Brent priorities and the subsections, and also gives you some examples of possible projects that would meet their priorities. So I recommend that you download the plan itself and you pay attention, if you're applying for any Brent money, to what it is they want. Like I said about guidelines, get a feel for what it is they want, as well as looking specifically at the priorities they're asking you to meet. This is on the chart that I sent you. It's an instruction really about how to match what you do with a priority. So I've taken an example here of a family support project. And I've said the outcomes of that project, which are in that middle panel there, are people have healthy relationships and friendships, etc. And then the next one to the left of that, following the arrows, goes to the actual stated Brent Borough priorities when it divides them down. And in this case, it leads back to their one of their main 5 areas, which is a borough where we can all feel safe, secure, happy and healthy. So you can trace, you can go in either direction really. You can trace from that borough priority, as they call them, down to their outcomes, their specifics, down to your outcomes, and then your project. So you can see how to make your project, what you do and what you're asking them to fund, match what they want you to do. I'm not saying fiddle around to make it match, but I'm saying look carefully at how it does match, because a lot of what you do will fit into their priorities, even if it's not immediately obvious. So for instance here, reduction in antisocial behaviour, risk of harm and reoffending. You might think, oh, that only really applies to projects around reducing offending behaviour, you know, working with young people or ex-offenders. Not at all. If people have got healthy relationships, if people have got confidence, if people know where to get help, if people have got firm attachments, even little children who have firm attachments, we know that they are less likely to indulge in antisocial behaviour, even though they're tiny now, but we know that that's likely to be the outcome later. We know if parents are doing a good job, know how to handle teenagers, that they're less likely to indulge in antisocial behaviour or offending. So you don't have to be addressing it directly, but you have to fit under that priority. And you will have to demonstrate how what you're doing would lead to a reduction in antisocial behaviour. Okay? All about matching your project. Okay, thinking about your real or imaginary projects, we've got another exercise here. Have a go at prioritising. The Mentimeter will ask you to rank. It will give you a first, which of the priorities, and it will give you, you can select an option. And so select the first one, it will then say select the second one, select the third one. So they're in order of how much they are a match with your project, your real or imaginary project. Yeah, so spend a couple of minutes doing that. So you should be able to see, as people's results come in, what the more common priorities are that your projects are meeting as a whole. Doesn't matter if yours is 5th, it just means you're doing something less common than everyone else, which is great. As people vote, it's changing because this is ranking it. Okay. Ooh, getting lots of hearts. Does that mean you all love me? Oh, nice. Don't know how that's happening. Can you see the next slide now? The awards for all supporting communities to thrive. Somebody tell me they can. Yeah.
That we can.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm just a bit worried because I should have said at the beginning, this is only the 2nd time I've done a presentation on Zoom. and it's only the first time I've used Mentimeter as my presentation on Zoom. So really frightened. So on your charts that I sent you, you will be able to see not only the 5 priorities of Brent, but the ways in which they divide up. And what I strongly suggest is that you have a go at thinking about your own project and how they might match up together, because if you apply to Brent Council, that is going to be key. That is going to be crucial. If you can't demonstrate that you will meet one or more of their priorities, then they're not even going to consider your application. However, we're going to move on now to looking at Awards for All, who do a similar thing. And although we're focusing on Brent Priorities and Awards for All, this method, this approach is common with any applications that you put in, making sure that what you are going to do and what you are asking them to fund meets what they want to do with their money. It's their money, they don't have to give it to you. So what do you need to do to show that if they do give it to you, you'll be helping them with improving whatever it is they want to improve? Okay. Awards for All, at the moment, they do change their outcomes from time to time. But at the moment, it's very much stressing this, supporting communities to thrive. Don't forget that communities are made up of people. So don't worry if your project is aimed at specific people, people who are sleeping rough, people with disabilities, etc. They are important parts of communities, and it doesn't mean it's not all about painting the gardens, getting rid of graffiti, which we tend to think of as improvements to the community. There are different types of communities. There are geographical ones, which we sometimes call neighborhoods. Yeah. So, and you might well be, we're all in Brent. So that's always one of our communities is Brent, but you could cover more than one borough and take in several geographical communities. Could be one ward of Brent, that would be a community. But we also have communities of interest. And you'll see from these subheadings some clues to those, because they want to see improved relationships, improved places and spaces, and they want to help people reach their potential. Yeah, so it could be you work with people with disabilities, people who are wheelchair users, let's say, and they're a community in themselves, but they're also part of the community in which they live. Yeah. And so you might want to improve places and spaces to make them more accessible by people who are wheelchair users. Yeah. You might want to also help people who use wheelchairs to build relationships within their own families, within their immediate neighborhoods, by taking part more often in community activities, by having their voice heard. So lots of ways in which you are addressing these requirements of Awards for All. But again, you'll be asked, how is your project? Which of these, first of all, which of these outcomes does it meet? And you need to match your individual outcomes for your project with these. And how are you going to meet these outcomes? Just want to mention this last one, by supporting them at the earliest possible stage. And that's because some people do get that a little bit, find that a little bit difficult to address, because if, for instance, you work with teenagers when they have broken the law or been charged or something, you might think, well, would have been better to work with them at the earliest possible stage, which would have been when they were tiny little kiddies. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that. I mean, if you do work with tiny little kiddies on helping them develop strong attachments with parents, or learn about, have strong aspirations for themselves and personal confidence, then that's great. You can say, we're catching them at the earliest possible stage. But you can also define earliest possible stage as when the problem arises, or when you first become aware of it. So don't worry too much about that, but do include it if you are addressing that particular outcome. So show that you will be meeting people at the earliest stage possible. Okay. Here are the awards for all priorities on the left, and some possible outcomes and indicators, which I've just invented. So they're not from awards for all. And I want you to consider the sentence: with the help of our project, that's your project, the beneficiaries will, or the beneficiaries will be. Yeah. And just choosing single words, I want you to contribute possible outcomes. So single words is things like happy, confident, independent, yeah, things like that. I'm hoping it's not on the next page. Yes, it is. You're doing it already. You're amazing. So we've got some lovely outcomes there. I don't know what fast would mean. You want, is it a sports organization and you want people to get faster at running or jumping? Or, I don't know, creative, you want people to be more creative, have an opportunity to create. Inspiration, transpiration, it's a nice word. Okay, again, what you're doing there is thinking about your own outcomes and how they match with what the funder wants to achieve, how they match with what the funder is asking for. You don't, of course, just have to say what your outcomes are going to be. You need to show that you will measure them. We're going to break into breakout groups again, and we will be there for 5 minutes. So I'm going to stop sharing. Breakout groups. And we are going to discuss, I'd like you in your breakout group to share one outcome or indicator of your project. So you might say, we're trying to make people more independent, and let the other people in the group come up with possible ways you might measure that. So, oh, well, a good way to measure that would be just very snappy, very quick. Yeah. Say an outcome, see if people know how you might measure that outcome. Yeah. Just to get you talking. I'm not going to test you on it afterwards. So I'm going to put you into rooms. Everybody back? Put the presentation up again. Okay. Just very quickly, could one person from each group perhaps very, very quickly just give me one of the ideas that they came up with for how you might measure something? Group 1, shall we start with, if you know you were in group 1? Go on, I dare you.
Are we? I think we're group run. Is that right, ladies?
Yeah, go on. Don't worry too much about it.
I think we looked at evaluation forms. We looked at client feedback, questionnaires, one-to-one interviews.
Brilliant. That sounds great.
Okay, great.
Anyone from the next group? Especially if you had anything different, but don't worry if you had the same ideas.
I'll jump in quickly then. I've no idea what group we were, but we looked at testimonials,
Good one, yeah.
evaluation forms. I think somebody said that previously, but sort of testimonials and case studies.
Oh yeah, case studies, good one, excellent. Okay, anyone in another group?
Yeah, we discussed because Ariane works with young people, and so not to make them feel so overwhelmed, to have more of a focus group to discuss the outcomes rather than
Excellent.
put them on the spot. And I think for my example, it was maybe get those who are like working on digital inclusion, just to give them an exercise rather than a test to see how confident they were and what they've achieved in the sessions.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. It sounds like you've come up with one or two slightly less common ones, but also the very popular ones, such as surveys, questionnaires. They are fantastic. There's nothing wrong with a nice questionnaire or survey. But I would say, and Ariane, who I know, is making the right decision in saying, is this method of evaluating going to suit the people, my beneficiaries that I actually want to be part of this evaluation? And that's always worth considering. Obviously, not everybody has internet access. Not everyone finds it easy to fill out an online form. Not everyone finds it easy to fill out a printed form. So if you can think around that and use several different methods for collecting your information, then you're onto a good thing. I am a big fan of individually devised and designed evaluation methods that were for your group and suit your group. Some people don't like that. They want a standard one across the whole organization, across the whole field of organizations doing similar things, or across the whole sector even. Effectively, some funders, again, mostly statutory funders, do sometimes provide you with monitoring and evaluation form. So they give you the form that they want you to use to collect the information. Doesn't mean you can't use other ones for your own use. Never forget that outcomes measurement is for two purposes. One is to know that the work you're doing is being effective, and one is to prove that the work you're doing is being effective. And they're both equally important. The one that to know that you're being effective is so that you can stop doing it if it's not having any effect, so that you can alter it, extend it, change it, so that you can do more of it. Or for specific people, you can alter it if it's not doing what it should do. And secondly, that's really important, and that's really why you should do it. But obviously, because funders ask for it, you often have to design something that meets their requirements. But don't forget, its primary purpose is so that you do a good job. If you want any help with design of evaluation forms, do get in touch with me anytime. Not any forms, any evaluative methods. Ones that perhaps you may well have mentioned them but didn't get said out loud are what I call snapshot evaluations. I've only got two to say, and I'm writing them down so that by the time I've finished talking about the first, I haven't forgotten the second. One is snapshot evaluations. That's kind of like end of the session things, where you get people to put a thumbs up if it's all been good. Or you can do slightly more imaginative things. One I often tell people about, which works well with children and young people, but there's no reason why you can't do it with adults, is to stand very, very tall if you're satisfied and it went well for you, and stand very, very small, crouch if it didn't. And then you can literally take a snapshot, a photograph of that scene, and that provides you with some evidence. That's mostly suitable for evaluation rather than outcomes measurement. And you'll see here the definition really of those different things. So outcomes measurement, remember when we talked about your outcomes are the changes that take place. So outcomes measurement is obviously measuring if those changes did take place. My favorite outcomes measurement is a before and after evaluation. That's where you ask people some questions before. Are you happy? Have you got enough friends? And then you ask them the same questions after. By before and after, I mean early on in your intervention and later or towards the end of your intervention. And so you don't ask them, did this help you? Did what we did help you feel happier? Because that's asking them to assess themselves. Instead, you ask them, how happy are you now? And then you ask them again, how happy are you now? And you can tell the difference. You do the work. They said they were happy 2 out of 10 6 weeks ago when we started this. And now they say they're happy 6 out of 10 6 weeks later. So we know they've moved from 2 to 6. And then you could say, overall, you did that with 100 people. And overall, most people moved 3-4 places along that scale. That's just an example. You don't have to do it exactly like that. And so that before and after principle, they're the best kind, but they don't suit every client group. They don't suit every activity or every circumstance. So there's lots of other ways. The second one I wanted to mention is simple observation. If you can see that somebody is mixing more, speaking out more in the group, asking more questions, joining in, not sitting on the edge so much. If you can see a difference in a person, then that's an observation. If you write it down on a sheet of paper called observation, date, what happened, sign it at the bottom, it becomes a professional observation and an observation that you can use in your outcomes measurement. And you can tell your funder that that's one of the techniques that you use for measuring your outcomes. I'm not going to go on about these for too much longer because I think you all know, but if you have any problems with them at all, get on to me. Sign up to my bulletins, which back copies give you loads and loads of information about these. But ask, please ask if you aren't completely certain what all these things are. Outcomes measurement, outcomes themselves, monitoring, evaluation, impact. Okay. We've not got long now. This is question 5. And I think it's a boring one because it's not about monitoring and evaluation. And I'm not going to spend much time on it. But just to say that it is something you get asked. You will need to say, basically, who and how are you going to run the project? So if you've got paid staff, you need to talk about them. It might be all volunteers and that's fine, but you still need to talk about what the arrangements are for those, what the responsibilities of each of the people are. Definitely what arrangements you've made for management. So even if you are using all volunteers, you still need to support those volunteers and manage them and manage difficulties and manage the project as a whole. So who is going to do that? That's all that one says. And then the really boring one, the budget. If, of course, you have got your funding pack, which we talked about right at the beginning, let me know if you want a funding pack checklist. It's quite long, but you only do it once and then you've got everything together. You will have in there what I call project proposals, which mean that you've thought about a project, you've thought about a service development, let's say, something you want to do that you're not currently doing or you want to expand. And you write a proposal. It's almost like writing a funding application, but one bit of it will be the budget. And so you need to have worked that out. And funders will ask you, how are you going to spend the money? Unless it's for a very tiny amount, they will ask you how you're going to divide it up, what you're going to spend on what. And they will ask you how you've come up with those figures. So it's not enough. If they see completely round figures, that's going to be 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 1,500. It doesn't look, it'd be terrible, a weird coincidence if everything you wanted to buy, everybody's salary, every expense ended in double noughts, wouldn't it? So that means you've not really looked at, that's fine for when you're costing it up for yourself, a quick guess at how much it might cost, but they want to know the real figures and how you've arrived at them. They don't expect you to keep to every single penny when you actually run the project, because often things turn out to be different, but they do expect you to keep roughly within that, and adding it up at this stage is a good idea. Very few funders will give you more along the way if it turns out to be more expensive, but they will ask you for the money back if it turns out to be that you haven't spent it, or you haven't spent it how you should have done. So be careful with that. Big funders like the lottery are very, very understanding. For instance, if you employ somebody and then they leave, they'll sometimes give you more money to re-advertise the post. They will also, if you say, oh, well, we haven't spent as much of that as we thought we would, but that's cost us lots more. Can we move some money from there to there? They will let you do that as long as you ask them nicely, but not pennies, you know, or even pounds. They can float around a little bit and have a lot of flexibility, but record your expenditure. But at this point, you're just telling them what you expect to spend. Read the question carefully, because different funders ask for different kinds of information. I want to talk a little bit about full cost recovery. I don't know how many people already know that, so bear with me if you do. Full cost recovery is a rare thing, and it's when a funder says, we'll give you the money for running your project, for employing that person, buying that equipment, spending that travel money, but we'll also give you money for your kind of overheads, for the fact you have to have an office. You've got 6 projects running, not just this one that we're funding, but we know you have to have an office, you have to have a manager, you have to have a printer. You're not going to just print for this project on it. You might be printing for all the different work you do. But we recognise that there are some costs attached to this, and we will pay towards those. So some will say, tell us what they are. You have to work it out. And some will say, we'll give up to 10% of the overall project costs towards your core costs, your overheads. That's called full cost recovery. A lot of funders will only give you the project costs. So you've got to find the money for all those overheads somewhere else. And that's another training session on where you would find those from. But just bear that in mind. What are they actually asking? What can you put on this budget sheet in this application? Okay. We're almost finished now, and we're going to have a full 8 minutes in breakout groups. And I want you to, if possible, have the mock application form in front of you, but don't worry if you haven't. And I want you to ask yourselves in your group, what's still troubling us, what's still confusing us. And there's going to be a chance afterwards to ask questions, written questions. And so if you can come up in your group, if you can agree on 1 or 2, what's your consensus? Maybe you won't all ask the questions at the end, but one of you can be selected to say, this is the thing that's really confusing us. This is what we don't understand. This is what we want more information about. And just agree that in your group. You might find your colleagues have got answers for you and you don't need to ask me. That's fine. So you should be able to see on your Mentimeter exercise question time, and you can type in your questions. I'm going to start answering them as they come in. So we've got one that says, please say more about indicators. Ooh, I love them. So an outcome is the change that takes place as a result of your activities in people or communities. An indicator is very similar to an outcome, but it's something more specific that's usually more measurable. So, for instance, your outcome might be to the old people are fitter and more healthy because you're running an exercise class, say. So an outcome might be they're fitter and more healthy. An indicator would be they can now touch their toes. Person can now touch their toes, whereas they couldn't before. So very specific. That is really specific. They don't have to be quite that specific, but it's very observable, very noticeable, very measurable. What do you write for insurance, the value or the name of the company? Well, it depends what they ask. If they just, often funders will just say, are you insured? You know, have you got public liability or whatever insurance? If they do ask for more detail, please evidence what you're insured. Yeah, it's usually to give the who you've got the insurance with, and then some kind of a reference, your reference on that, so they could prove it. But unless they ask you to send your insurance details, which they don't usually do, but if they do, then obviously you would send your, well, I forgot what they call it, you know, the main sheet that goes through what you're insured for. It's not my area of expertise, but I hope that answers the question. Theory of change confuses me. Oh gosh, it confuses me. I used to hate theory of change. I thought it was just a Ponzi name for a plan, and I very much resisted learning about it. But then I did. I went on a course and I decided, although it is a bit of a Ponzi name for a plan, which might help you understand it, it's quite a useful plan. And it's about, I don't know why it's called theory of change. That just makes it sound like you're doing a PhD in ethics or something. But it's if you take the issue that's driven you to set up your organization or your project, so say it's that people are unhealthy, yeah, maybe old people, like my last example, that's your challenge. And you say, so we're going to set up exercise classes for people, and they will help people be more flexible. They will improve their condition of their heart. They will help them enjoy walks. So those are your outcomes and your indicators. And so what do you end up with? People with old people are fitter, healthier, have less heart condition problems. So your theory of change is how you get from that problem through those stages to the end result. That's all it is, really. If you go and do the training, there's other bits of it that feed into it, but that is basically all it is. I have got a theory of change kind of templatey thing. Again, a very simple one, but if you want one, email me after and ask for it and I'll send it you. Another course I know, but keen to know more about funding core costs. Yeah, it really, funding core costs, again, get help from CVS Brent, from Sophia, who's our funding lead now. And it's about identifying the right funders who will give core costs. It's also about finding other sources of income for core costs. Unrestricted funding is good for core costs, such as that you make from donations, etc. Do you have funding form templates available? Does that mean like a template for applying for funding? Not sure what it means. But yes, if I haven't got one, I'll make one up for you. So again, let me describe to me what you mean and I'll let you have something. Full cost recovery course, please. Okay, I'll talk to my colleagues about that. The funding side of things, I have done a lot of it in my time, but it's not my actual area of, not my remit within this job. But I'm happy to talk about full cost recovery. It's hard to get, and it's similar to that. How do you get your core costs? Though obviously on full cost recovery, you might be getting your project costs plus a bit for core costs. I'll just say very, very quickly, If you've got 6 projects and you've got one office with a manager and other staff and admin worker, and they work on all of those 6 projects, each of those 6 projects should be contributing a little bit towards the costs of those central costs. That's the ideal way that full cost recovery works, but a lot of funders won't do it. So they're just horrid, but nice when they give you money. Some grant applications specifically list registered charity CIC. So what about being a company limited by guarantee? Should we email and confirm eligibility first? Yes, if you're not a CIC, then you're not, your constitution doesn't prove that you're a not-for-profit organisation, and you're unlikely to qualify, to be honest. You could become a CIC, but what organisations that don't require that you are a specific registered charity do require that you're a not-for-profit organisation. And if you've registered as an ordinary company, then you won't be registered as a not-for-profit. But you could start, that company could start running a not-for-profit activity or project, and you might be able to work it that way. Other sources of funding you plan to use for this project? Can you leave a plate blank? You can leave a blank, but good to say that you will at least make an effort to raise some money yourselves, even if it's just, we'll have a donations page, even if it's going to be a tiny little bit of your overall cost. It shows you're willing and you've thought about it. And if you are applying to other funders, then yeah, you put that there. It depends on how it's worded, whether you tell them all the funders you've applied for, or if you're going to source this project from this funder and another funder, then you would put that there because you're showing how you're going to fund the project as a whole. That's it. Ask me anything else in email if you want. Happy to answer. Sorry to be so whizzy. I really like to keep to time, but we did start a little bit late. I've only got this one last slide, so I hope you'll indulge me in it. Can you see it? And you should be able to see it on your mentee meter. Do you remember at the beginning, I said we're going to cover these things. By the end, you should know this, 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 and this. This is for you to tell me how well this training has answered these particular things. So my line's gone a bit funny. Oh, you've done it. You've all done it. Brilliant. Give a chance for other people to have a go. So I'm really pleased, thank you, those who've done it already. I'm really pleased that most of you are edging over towards the strongly agree. I really am conscious that I've whizzed through things. I could have spent a whole session on each one of those. But as I said in my email, I didn't want to keep bringing you back. But if I do this again, I might extend it to 2.5 hours maybe. But hopefully it has met some of your needs. But absolutely get in touch with me if you've got little questions or you want a whole tranche of work done, if you want to develop any forms, any outcomes measurement, if you're still not sure what the outcomes are for your organization or your project, talk to me about it. Talk to me about specifics so that we can really drill that out of you. It can be a complicated thing. I sometimes feel like it's doing an A-level, and I say an A-level rather than a degree because A-levels are known to be the hardest thing you ever study, really, not to mention that the hardest time in your life usually. And I really think you could spend an awful lot of time taking all this on board. So I like to give people what they need to know rather than any extras. But if you want anything more, do get in touch with me. Thank you so much. Can you see those results, everybody? Yeah, good. So that's it. There's another cake. What was that one for? My birthday, I think, which was in July. And I've got my email address there, and also you can see us on Facebook, and you can go to our YouTube thing, which is only me waffling on videos. It's not that exciting, but you can have a bit of a laugh there, and absolutely get in touch with me if you need to. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. If you want anything, I will send it to you. If you request it, I will automatically send the slides from this, not that they're much use, but you get nice pictures of a couple of cakes. So I will automatically send those to everybody anyway. You don't have to ask for them if I can work out how to do it. If you don't get them, it's because I haven't got a clue. So email me telling me how. All right, thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Sally, thank you. It's very good.
Thank you,
Bye.
Sally. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Nice meeting you. Bye.